Hey everyone, it's Nightharo here, and today I've got a heavy attack Templar build with no Oakensoul ring. I know that might seem odd to some of you out there, but there are actually several reasons why you might want to do this. So the first thing I would say is that for a new person who doesn't have all of the scrying unlocked and all that kind of stuff, or maybe only has the base game, maybe you're just trying out ESO for the first time, this is a really good build. There are options for everything on this card here. They can be easily accessible and much easier to unlock than other features. The second main reason you might want to use this build is if you're someone who is trying to do veteran cloud rest and you need a heavy attack build for accessibility. Not only does this do good damage, but this does more than my heavy attack Sork, which is enough damage for pretty much everything in the game, short of a few hard modes where more damage is always better, and so your group might want something like that. All right, so first up here is Solar Barrage. This is the core of our build. Solar Barrage gives us Empower, which increases the damage done by our heavy attacks by 70%. This is huge and the main reason we don't have to use Oakensoul. In addition to that, it also increases our damage done with all of our class abilities by 5%, which is a really nice buff. After that, we have Power of the Light or optionally Purifying Light. So both of these skills do largely the same thing. They kind of copy the damage that we're already doing to our opponent. However, Power of the Light will also apply Minor Breach, which can be helpful in certain situations, and Purifying Light will instead provide a heal both to ourselves and to allies nearby. So for more survivability, you would go with something like Purifying Light. For more damage and penetration, if you need it, you go something like Power of the Light. And then down below, I did put Blazing Shield. So if you're going very tanky and you're looking for more damage mitigation, like maybe you're running the new Endless Archive or something like that, then you can go ahead and swap this out. You will lose some damage, but you're kind of already saying, hey, I need to be more survivable, and that's always a trade-off that you have to make. So that's why I put Blazing Shield here. Another reason I put Blazing Shield is it will reflect and do some damage back to our opponents. And the other morph gives us a bigger shield, but it also reduces the cost, and we don't really need it to be cheaper since we're going to be on a heavy attack build. We kind of have infinite magicka, so that's why Blazing Shield makes the most sense. After that, we have Barb Trap. Barb Trap is a great single target dot. It also provides us with Minor Force, which increases our critical damage done by 10%. That is huge and something you want on every build. It normally comes with the Oakensoul ring. That's one of the buffs that provides, but again, we're not using it with this build, so we need something in its place. And then below that, I have Vampire's Bane. So if you don't have the Fighter's Guild skill unlocked, you don't have Barb Trap, or any of these abilities actually on your bar, Vampire's Bane is one of the first abilities you unlock, so you'll absolutely have this ability, and you'll have it morphed if you need it. And so really, you can flex this dot in any place that you need to on this build. Just realize it might do a little bit less damage, but again, if you don't have anything else to put on your bar, this is a great skill. Just go ahead and throw it on. And our Solar Barrage will still help our damage with this skill by an extra 5%, which is still pretty nice. After that, I have Camouflage Hunter and Inner Light. Both of these are just put on our bar for passives. Inner Light provides us with a bunch of max magicka, and that translates, having more max magicka translates to damage. You get equivalent of spell power for having more of your max stat, so that's why we have it here. And Camouflage Hunter, there is a passive in the Fighter's Guild skill line, which increases our weapon and spell damage for each Fighter's Guild ability slotted. So again, we're never going to cast these last two abilities. They're just here to be on our bar for the passive benefit. Because again, with a heavy attack build, you can only keep up so many dots, so we kind of have these empty spots on our bar. And then for our ultimate, we have Dawnbreaker, Flawless Dawnbreaker. This again is a Fighter's Guild ability. We're putting it on here for the passive. However, if you're finishing a fight or something and you have ultimate and you're not going to get enough for your back bar ultimate, you can go ahead and use this and it works pretty well. Now moving on to our back bar. So we're going to go with Wall of Elements, but instead of going unstable, we're actually going with Blockade. And the reason for that is because it lasts an extra 5 seconds, so it lasts 15 seconds instead of 10. And that increased time allows us to heavy attack and be able to keep up most of our dots a little bit better. And so that's why we go with that. Next up is the Mage's Guild ability, Degeneration. And this, along with our Camouflage Hunter and Inner Light, provide us with the two buffs that we need that we would normally get from using expensive spell power potions. It's not something we absolutely have to do. If you want to use those instead, that's totally fine. You could put something like Vampire's Bane here instead, and that would probably do a little bit more damage. But with this buff, it allows us to instead use Tri-Stat potions, or even something that, might be a little bit more survivable, and that can help us to keep ourselves alive. And there are some other reasons why you might want to use different kind of potions, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. But again, if we're going with something beginner friendly, maybe you don't have enough money or you don't have a lot of gold to be able to buy expensive potions, so being able to use this skill will allow you to just use, you can either use trash potions if you don't need health, or you can use Tri-Stat for a bit of recovery. And there's a couple of other kinds of potions that will give you like more healing and stuff like that, but we're not going to go into that right now. I'm considering strongly doing like a potion video by itself, where I just kind of like talk about all the different options for potions in the game right now, but I just can't go through it on every single build, so look for that maybe coming out soon. And then after that, we have Ritual of Retribution. This is a huge AoE damage over time ability. the damage ramps up on this as well. So this is a skill you want to try not to, we call it clipping, but you want to try not to cast this ability again early. You want to make sure it ticks all the way down. And then beneath that, I have Living Dark. Living Dark is an ability that actually heals you when you take damage. And you can end up with something like 4,000 HP per turn, just healing just from Living Dark, which is pretty nice because you cast it, it stays up for quite a while, and then it heals you for a percentage of the damage caused. Not necessarily the first skill I would put on my bar, but it is an option. And again, remember that these flex spots are meant to be able to use, anywhere. Don't feel like where I put this is like set in stone or anything. And then again, we have Inner Light and Camouflage Hunter from the Mages Guild and Fighters Guild respectively. And then one more survival skill here, I have Restoring Focus. You could use either morph of this ability. Restoring Focus heals you for a little bit more and restores stamina, and the other morph restores magicka. And we don't really need more magicka since we're heavy attacking with the lightning staff, so that's why I went with Restoring Focus, but both options are technically valid. And then last up here is actually from the Mages Guild skill line. And this is the ultimate. It's called Shooting Star. I think I called this something weird on my last video. I called it like a comet or something. But anyways, Shooting Star. This is the Mages Guild skill ultimate. It is very hard to unlock. You have to have Mages Guild maxed out. So I did give another option here instead. The reason we want to use this, it just does really good damage. We could also use something like a Destra ult from the Destruction Staff skill line. That would also work just fine. Or if we want to stick with the Templar skill line, something that's easy to unlock, Crescent Sweep from the Templar skill line. The Mages Guild is nice because if you hit a bunch of targets, it will give you back ultimate, so you can kind of drop it more often. Crescent Sweep is nice because it's from our class skill line, so it's easy to unlock. Destra Staff works pretty well, although normally we would prefer to do that with like an Inferno Staff. The difference in these, though, is fairly minor, so, it's mostly going to be like, hey, what can I easily unlock and what can I get to? Don't feel like you need to go grind out Mages Guild for this one ability. It is absolutely not worth it, so don't stress it. I almost hesitate to put it on here. But that is it for our Parse. So pretty straightforward. Again, the flex spots, they can go absolutely anywhere. Let's go ahead and move on and talk about CP. So the main thing we want to do with CP, with our blue CP, is go with Weapons Expert. And this just increases the damage with our heavy attacks. This is the first thing you want to unlock. Just head straight for it. You do have to kind of click and zoom in to get to the Weapons Expert, but just go to that first and increases our damage with our heavy attacks and light attacks by 20%. So that's the first CP you want to get. That's the one that's really going to make a huge difference. After that, everything else is going to be like a 3%-ish damage increase. So nothing like huge if you don't have a lot of CP. So Wrathful Strikes, Thaumaturge, and Exploiter are what I recommend. Nothing really to be said too much about those. They work pretty well. You put them on your bar. You don't really need to think about it. For red CP, I threw out a couple of options that I personally like. There are other things as well, like Slippery can be very nice situationally. The red CP tree is really choose your own adventure. So do whatever you want. I offer some suggestions here, but it's entirely up to you. Celerity increases your speed in combat. That's always helpful. Expert Evasion gives you a free roll dodge. That you can never go wrong with that. Fortify gives you increased armor, which basically adds to both of your resistances, and that's always helpful. Rejuvenation, honestly, on a heavy attack build, maybe we don't need this here. It's just a standard thing that I put almost on all of my builds because it is, so good. It's always a good idea to have more recovery. But on a heavy attack build, Rejuvenation is probably the first thing I'd swap out. After that, we're stacking all of our points into Magicka. This is a Magicka-focused build. We have the Thief Mundus. Skipping down a bit, you want to go with either High or Dark Elf for an optimized build, but really you can play any race you want. At most, it's like a 5% damage difference, and that's if you're playing like a race that only gives you stamina bonuses and you're a Magicka tune. So just keep that in mind. It's really not that big of a deal. If you are like, hey, I really want to play this race, or hey, I really don't like that race, like just play the one you want if that's more of a concern for you. It's not a big deal. And then for food, salmon millet soup, any soup that does the same effect that gives you max magicka and max health is going to be the best way to go. And then, of course, we already mentioned tri-stat potions are what we're going to go with here. We don't need weapon and spell power since we have all those buffs covered with our build. Now, moving back up to gear. So the one set you want with just about any heavy attack build is going to be Sergeant's Mail, and this drops from Wayrest Sewers, both 1 and 2. You can run it on normal. You don't need to run on veteran. There's no reason to. And I'll pop up here and you can see where I have everything on my body. And then our next set here is Arms of Reliquin, and this drops from Cloudrest. This is a trial, but you could run this on normal and get these pieces. And you only need body pieces, so you can run a +0. It's actually pretty easy to do. Cloudrest can be a little crazy because there's people running around everywhere, but on normal, anybody can complete normal Cloudrest, I promise you. And then after that, for a monster set, we're going with Zaan. This drops some Scale Collar Peak. You do have to run on Veteran to get the helm, and then you get the shoulder with keys at the Undaunted vendor. If that's a little hard for you, we're just starting out, any decent monster set, just anything that seems like it'll work, throw that on until you can get the more meta setup. It's not really a big deal. I will note with Deadly, we are putting all of our Deadly on our body, and then Sergeants is jewelry and our weapon. So actually purchasing Deadly body pieces shouldn't be that expensive. I mean, obviously, if you're new, it'll be expensive to you. But if you've been playing for a while, it's not really that expensive. So you could probably just go buy it. But again, if you're brand new, you're leveling or something, go with something like Order's Wrath. That's a crafted set. Will work just as well. We already talked about Reliquin. And then after that, Noble Duelist and Stormmaster. And there are other heavy attack sets out there. I almost put etc. after this. But hopefully with like 4 or 5 sets, that should get you set up. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about how to use this build. So with most heavy attack builds, the best, kind of most efficient thing to do is heavy attack, skill, even if dots are dropping off. So the first thing we're going to make sure we keep up at all times is our Solar Barrage. Again, that is giving us Empower, which increases all the damage of our heavy attacks. So Solar Barrage should be your first priority on making sure you keep that up. After that, we want the Minor Force from Barb Trap. That could be very important to increasing our overall damage. Then Degeneration for that buff. It's going to increase our weapon and spell damage by 20%, so we want that up pretty quickly. Honestly, that might be more important than Barb Trap, but they're probably not too far apart. And then after that, we have our back bar, Wall of Elements. That'll help us keep our weapon damage enchant on our back bar. Ritual of Retribution. And then we can worry about keeping up Power of the Light after that. If we cast Power of the Light too early, we'll have to constantly be coming back and recasting it. And so I personally find it a lot easier is to just get all these long dots ticking and then kind of keep Power of the Light up after that. But make sure that, Solar Barrage is about to run out. Make sure you recast that. The only skill that you really don't want to recast early on this is going to be Power of the Light, or the magic alternative, and then Ritual of Retribution. Those are the 2 main skills that I would try not to recast early if you can at all help it. Everything else, if you cast it a second or 2 early, it's really not going to be a big deal. And then what you're actually going to do while you're parsing is you're going to hold heavy attack, cast the skill, and then if you need a bar swap, that's the ideal time to do it. And the reason for that is it'll cancel the animation. So you hit the skill, you'll see it go off, but then you can immediately bar swap after you hit the skill. And you can barely see any animation, but you'll see like glowing on the ground. You'll see these spell effects basically, and that's how you know that you've successfully cast the skill. And I think that covers everything. But if you have any questions about this, please drop them in the comments below. That is immensely helpful to me. I will absolutely answer your questions as best as I can, but it also helps me to try to make sure, hey, in the next video, or the next thing that I do, how could I do this better? For example, I added the race and food and potion options here onto this card because I was getting a lot of questions with my last heavy attack build, and so I wanted to address that. When you study and you stare at this stuff as much as I do, sometimes you forget how much you've learned along the way. So anyways, questions are always helpful, and I appreciate you guys asking them. Thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.